Good morning and welcome to CTN. And to learn more about CTN, please visit CIOTalkNetwork.com. And the topic for today is EA as the digital catalyst. So let's talk about enterprise architecture, which was traditionally considered an overhead by many organizations. They would keep it on the side. They will say that it slows us down. But then there is a new wave of enterprise architecture that at least we are hearing that it can work as a catalyst. It can help you reimagine how do you drive the strategy and execution for digital transformation. So, who is able to turn EA around on its head? Who are and how are progressive leaders adopting enterprise architecture for success in the digital realm? So, to discuss all of this, I have with me Praveen Moturu. Praveen is the Chief Enterprise Architect at Mars. Hey, Praveen, how are you?
Good morning, Sanjog. It's a pleasure to have you along with the team members here on CTO Network.
Great. Thanks so much. Now, let's dig in directly. So, we are talking about enterprise architecture. Let's talk about, or rather, do a compare and contrast. Enterprise architecture as a function, of course, is very important and it can be strategic, but it was not given the importance earlier in many cases where they felt it just slows people down. They're trying to build this ideal state, which is not even possible to execute on. And that's why, while that existed, but they always had a fight upstream to try to deal with things and to make people understand why they should adopt what's being suggested as part of enterprise architecture. Now, in this digital realm, you are and many other enterprise architects and CXOs are claiming that we can use enterprise architecture to our advantage and it will not slow us down. It will in fact help us bring agility. Tell me what changed.
Great question, Sanjog. I think traditionally enterprise architecture has been established in organizations to define strategy, define vision, and more a consultative role. That's where I think most of the organizations have positioned enterprise architecture in the past. Where we are seeing with the shifts in agile ways of doing, thanks to digital transformation, with the focus on customer, consumer, and stakeholder values, it becomes more relevant. Architecture doesn't stay at defining vision and strategy, but also continuously and incrementally add value while taking it to execution and ensuring that the vision is put to value. So that's a huge shift and change in the way architecture teams need to think in terms of being more agile to address the agility we need, along with being adaptive and being flexible, thinking both short-term, mid-term, long-term. At the same time, a critical component of alignment to the objectives, goals, and the organization's value drivers, and making them really see value to earn the trust and seat at the table.
So, what you're telling is, of course, how I would have defined enterprise architecture earlier. And I'm assuming I would not change the core definition. Has the relevance changed?
Of course, the relevance has changed because as we are moving at a greater pace, the pace of change is very relevant to the conversation of how do we position architecture to ensure that they have the end-to-end visibility, they have outward-in perspective, and the ability to connect the dots across the enterprise. While there are several SWAT teams or program teams or product teams working more in a siloed nature, there's somebody who needs to drive a true alignment between these products or these projects. And that's the shift that brings more importance to enterprise architecture at the current moment.
If you think about in the digital realm, we are trying to be agile, or we rather are trying to shift things because we don't know what's going to come next and how we can best leverage what is made available as an innovation in the marketplace or in terms of where the customer wants to go. The speed of shift is changing quite a bit. And if we continue to shift things that quickly, which is in contrast to what enterprise architecture suggests that, okay, you have a blueprint, and yes, you would continue to evolve it, but you're not going to continue to shift it. and let that be used as a benchmark to evaluate any and everything we do at the execution level. That becomes like a guideline, like the Holy Grail. But if the Holy Grail keeps shifting, it's truly not an architecture. It's like someone keep redrawing what that blueprint looks like. But doesn't that create more problems that you're changing the very benchmark and it could have regression issues and you might keep shifting one thing and the other thing becomes weaker and you don't notice, and then you try to have the rest of the organization aligned to it and it actually creates more chaos?
Excellent question, Sanjog. I think the way I will address this is generally enterprise architecture teams have the blueprint, we call them digital reference models or capability models, right? Across all the business process, business capability, working with information/data, then looking at applications and solutions and looking at integration, security and technology layers, right? So these blueprints, as you discussed, are in place to serve as reference points, as standards and reusable assets that we already invested in. But coming back to your question, since there is the agile nature and continuous change and continuous innovation and continuous improvements, the way we can term or coin this approach would be, we can understand this by a phase-layered approach. A phase-layered approach is really telling what is the phase of change and what is the impact. First of all, we need to look at our value drivers and key performance indicators for the enterprise in terms of OGSM, objectives, goals, strategies, and metrics. If we understand those, then we need to align our blueprints in such a way that we are using this phase-layered approach where the core systems or the foundational fundamental platforms are not changing that often. And they are loosely coupled and a layered approach using API-based integration. With that said, the core systems is the foundational rock of the reference architecture for any enterprise. On the top of it would be a layer of systems of differentiation where we are building and plugging in tailored solutions to meet a specific niche advantage or a competitive advantage. That's number 2 layer. And the third layer would come as a systems of engagement or systems of innovation. And this layered approach will help us to say where more change is happening at the system of innovation, system of engagement layer, and the system of differentiation, what is our core layer remains less changing, yet provide very loose coupling and API-based approach where we define these as microservices architecture or headless architecture solutions that will clearly support the pace of change in multiple layered approach.
Now, what you just shared looks like an evolution to the traditional EA, which used to be very tightly integrated. And I understand the services architecture requires you to be loosely coupled, and which is how the rest of the world is going to. That's at the technical level, rather the geek level. You spoke about also layering or also designing it so that anytime when a custom things happen or any shift happens, it doesn't become a rip and replace of the enterprise architecture. You just go to that module and fix it. Is that how you feel every enterprise architecture-based blueprint be shifted to if they want to see any relevance of that EA model to work in this digital realm?
Absolutely. I think I will give you 3 key points to pursue here. 1, we talk about platforms. 2, product. And 3, the processes. So I'll start with processes. Processes are the way we look at business capabilities and understand the whole business model and understand what capabilities are core, what capabilities are differentiating, and what capabilities are more innovative or emerging. So that capability-centric perspective would help you to connect the business capabilities or the functions and processes to the digital or technology capabilities. So that's really key. That's number 1. Number 2, when we talk about platforms, the platforms need to be supportive, flexible, and also ability to support multiple products on the top. Yeah, the products can be variants of how business wants to do a specific function or a specific process for a specific region or a business segment itself. So having the construct of a platforms to solidly support, having the thought process, taking a business capability-centric approach, and enabling these into products, that 3-point approach would help you to think how enterprise architecture can evolve in the future in terms of both technology platforms, products and solutions, and as well in terms of how you're looking at business capabilities. So you can establish a true enterprise blueprint that's flexible and also that's connected with a layered approach.
So traditionally, enterprise architecture leans towards perfectionism. Means this is where we ought to go. And rightfully, because you're trying to make that as a blueprint, something where everybody in the organization can look up to. Now, to make it relevant for digital where we don't know where to go, say in the next quarter or next 6 months, that means you have to experiment. So do you keep experimentation out of the EA, or the EA changes are going to be subsequent to the experimentation done and insights achieved, and then we know, okay, this is the kind of shift. So is EA following what is the core tenet of digital, which is experimentation, and isn't there a conflict because it is always trying to be perfect and digital says, no, you cannot be perfect if you want to evolve?
Great point. So let's define EA tends towards perfection aspect, right? So as we have shifted to be more agile and more take iterative or incremental approach, we have to, our enterprise architecture organizations have adapted more agile, adaptive, and aligned methods to support test and learns or fail fast. I think that there are a couple of points here I wanted to also emphasize on. Most of these test and learns and fail fast are great, but at the same time, it has to be driven by the KPIs. It has to be driven by value drivers. And we have introduced several methods in architecture to cater to these services as well. And these methods include like a fast track, self-service, giving them some guardrails and tenants so that they can clearly understand where do we start, where do we end, and how do we keep the rest of the architecture in loop while everybody in the enterprise is eligible to conduct these tests and learns. Still, the focus needs to be on cost, the value we are doing, and most importantly, this is where architecture comes into picture, is how do we connect it to a product lifecycle? How do we connect it, what we are trying to do with these tests and learns to show an end-to-end value? Because I'll give you an example. Anybody can look at a customer or consumer experience data and identify that there's an insight that will tell that the customers are unsubscribing more in a particular region. Knowing that insight or fact, how do we connect it to the downstream processes? How do we connect it to the organizational people models? And how do we connect to it boundary systems to take actions out of it? That is something that would require an architect to look at a blueprint and understand what are the different layers that are getting engaged in delivering this closed loop end-to-end process. So while we're excited about this test and learns and fast and to fail and dirty, all are good, but there should be some method and structure to this madness. Otherwise, what will happen is we'll eventually put a lot of money in these test and learns, and we will be hard to find how they connect into our product life sets, our product lines, which will really turn them into value. And then also make sure that it's an end-to-end incremental innovation rather than we just fix the top layer or just go behind a shiny object and deliver something. So that's end-to-end aspect of delivering a closed loop value model is where enterprise architecture is shifting to bring value to the organizations.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back. And Praveen, when we come back, how about you going through your journey at Mars? I'm assuming you did something good and you even won awards on how enterprise architecture helped you go digital. So in that, let's take the context of, on one hand, the Mars business leaders must be trying to figure out what is the new business landscape, what is the new customer looking for. And then there is a desire by the business leaders to go experiment, fail small, fail fast. And here comes Praveen and his group, which says, folks, we have to have a structure to the madness. How did you bring it all together and got those business leaders to recognize that they need you? And at the same time, you also found a balance between you trying to build that perfect structure and them trying to get to learn through experimentation what they want. How was it on the ground? Please stay tuned, listeners. We'll be right back.
Today, enterprise technology is both strategic and global. Each week on CTN CIO Talk Network, IT thought leaders from around the world share their experience with listeners as they discuss with Sanjog Aul how they are trimming costs and partnering with business to innovate and help IT become more competitive, better care for customers, and improve the corporate bottom line. If you want to keep up with IT thought leadership, listen to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul at CIOTalkNetwork.com. You are listening to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul. To learn more about our program, please visit CIOTalkNetwork.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. So, Praveen, your business wanted to experiment. They wanted to understand what's new, more or different that's happening in the business landscape and the customer's mindset or the way they are behaving, the way they want to consume the products. And on the other side, you're bringing this ideal model of how things should be run. I'm sure there was tug of war. I'm sure there was struggle and or some compromises made. Tell us more.
Great. Sanjog, at Mars, I think when enterprise architecture was established 18 months ago, the charter was very clear. We were lucky to have the leadership really focus on how do we put enterprise architecture to action. It started with the first objective of Mars is doubling its revenue. So as we are taking a digital transformation approach, we need some structure rather than adding more different test and learns and bring different technologies and add complexity to what we are doing. So there should be some structural approach to how we do things. That's number one. The ask number two is we have not invested heavily in cleaning up the technologies or rationalization of applications, where we ended up with several applications across the enterprise, which resulted due to mergers, acquisitions, and takeovers and divestitures. Can we take it from a bottom-up approach and make sure that we clean the foundational blueprint or foundational portfolio so that as we add more, acquire more, and grow more in terms of business and do more of this digital interaction, we'll have a solid foundation. So that's the second ask. So I think with that clear charter, we have established a team that existed with Mars in a disparate form, and we brought some new players into the enterprise architecture team, and we started to establish the architecture functions. And here are the tenets that we have done differently this time. So the first one is speed and agility. When we talk about speed and agility, there's a clear difference between speeding versus going speed. It's pretty much as you drive your car onto a road, there's a 40-mile speed limit, so you stay within the 40 miles. Then you know what is speeding, and once you go speeding beyond 40 miles, then you don't have guardrails that can protect you. So this is similar way. What we have come up with is a minimum viable architecture, which will clearly articulate what are our standards and reusable assets. And most importantly, we educated people that if you use these minimum viable architectures, you can run with speed because this reusability, it's about organizational readiness, it's about the capability. So that's a fundamental aspect of how architecture can enable speed and agility. That's number one. And at the same time, we did a monthly sprint for architecture practice. So what it includes is every month we look at what's a pipeline. We do weekly scrums, daily scrums as needed, and make sure that on a monthly basis, the deliverables from architecture are very visible. The decisions we make are very visible. And also we draw application and technology rationalization programs. So we clearly called out what applications were sunset, what technologies were rationalized. So that gave a good communication of what architecture is doing, both from top-down digital transformation versus bottom-up rationalization approach. The second piece is the continuous cycle. So to have architecture relevant to large transformations, you need to stay relevant in terms of, as we educated, that we are doing monthly communications in terms of what's happening across the enterprise, which will give a good perspective on its ability to understand the enterprise. The third one is digital transformation. So as we are driving through our architecture practice, we take top-down priority approach, understand the drivers, and drive those priorities to have the right solutions and platforms in terms of digital transformation. Outward in knowledge, this is the most important. Most of the enterprises expect enterprise architecture team to have a good acumen of industry trends, a good acumen of business trends and technology trends. So we were able to establish peer-to-peer network connections across multiple peers in the CPG industry, manufacturing industry, to pull them towards and share challenges that we're facing and learn from experiences. Again, these partnerships don't stop with industry peers, but these guys are extending towards our strategic technology vendors and also integration partners. The last but most important thing, this is where the change is very value-driven. This is about collaboration. So we understand there are several architects across the enterprise, and we made an equal attempt to pull all the architects together on a virtual forum across the globe and pull the architects together first thing. Then we work with the commercial team, we work with the delivery organizations, we brought in with the design thinking teams, which is, I think, best approach for our success out credited for. And without collaboration, it could not have been accomplished what we are doing after 18 months here.
Any specific pushbacks or any specific tug of wars that you had to deal with before it settled? And go ahead.
Absolutely. I think I would say Mars is a more people's organization, very much focused on people and relationships. And I won't say there are pushbacks, but it's about understanding. And we have requested for an opportunity, to be very precise. We talked to people, leaders, and also bottom-up support organizations to clearly articulate, say, this is our opportunity. We need to do it as part of corporate citizenship for Mars. And the change is needed now more than ever, because if you don't come together and position enterprise architecture to help facilitate and drive and be in the center of this transformation, it would be really a complex situation that we need to deal with. So we're able to communicate that message and seek for an opportunity. And when we did that, as I said, we brought them all as partners for this transformation and architecture. So we clearly called out that architecture organization and architecture mindset are similar. And whatever you're doing for your enterprise, for your organization, for your project or product, we just need to bring those thoughts into the enterprise alignment so that we can help each other. And at the same time, we committed to drive this with speed. I think that's what is the fundamental difference, and the trust they issued with us is one of the reasons why we are here.
So one is that you got the business leaders to recognize the value and the way you can be flexible, or how EA can be flexible in terms of making things happen, and everybody moves forward. Did you have to make some accommodations in your enterprise architecture approach and modeling to accommodate some shifts or some quirks that you found in the way where the business wants to go? Was it only accommodations done from the business side to accommodate EA, or even EA was evolved, or there was some learning for you as a group to accommodate business? Did you shift some things?
Yeah, there was a big learning and shift of how we approach things. In traditional ways of EA, we do a lot of the background work or the industry research, and we evaluate options, alternatives, and come up with a recommendation. And then we socialize that recommendation with the rest of the teams, and then take additional feedback, and we solidify the recommendation. What we have learned is, this is an important lessons learned, collaborating and being part of a decision making. What we used to do in a traditional way is we have already done the work, as I said, and then we have come up with a recommendation. But what we realized is when we go with and engage these business stakeholders and rest of the IT stakeholders, we need to brainstorm scenarios. We need to brainstorm options. We need to truly engage them to be a decision partner rather than already going with a predefined mindset and laying out the recommendation and say, hey, this is what we think needs to be done. So that is a shift in how we started to do. And we have taken help of a design thinking approach where we put the customer or the stakeholder or the value consumer into the center of the equation. And we define the problem first very clearly and then connect it to the value drivers. So that's helped us to understand what are the scenarios we need to plan. How do we understand the experience map? How do we understand the journey maps of the stakeholder experience. So once we get to that level of engagement, then all the stakeholders feel that they are part of the decision making. They really understand the pros and cons of one versus other. And that helps us to drive the solution very successfully without having challenges down the line.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back. And let's talk about the simplification that we may have to do on the enterprise architecture for us to be able to handle or rather deliver on the agility mandate. But is there a risk? Could you go ahead and make the whole process agile, but in that process also oversimplify EA, which will undermine the value it would otherwise bring? What's that balance that we need to strike so that EA is able to support agility, but not reducing its own effectiveness? Please stay tuned, listeners. We'll be right back and discuss.
Today, enterprise technology is both strategic and global. Each week on CTN CIO Talk Network, IT thought leaders from around the world share their experience with listeners as they discuss with Sanjog Aul how they are trimming costs and partnering with business to innovate and help IT become more competitive, better care for customers, and improve the corporate bottom line. If you want to keep up with IT thought leadership, listen to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul at CIOTalkNetwork.com. You are listening to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. So yes, we want to simplify things because that's the recipe to get agility introduced into an organization. But does that mean enterprise architecture has to be simplified to a degree that it starts losing its effectiveness or the very core that it is built upon? What's the best way to strike a balance where we eat the cake and have it too? Praveen, what did you do on the ground on this front?
Yes, I think striking that balance is important. The way we provide services to the organization or work with the stakeholders across the organization is we have a few collaboration touch points, I would call, where we wanted to drive most of the engagement through fast track and self-service. As described, we defined some minimum viable architecture and guardrails that we would let the stakeholders or the consumers take that and adapt and use it to drive speed. At the same time, we have checkpoints where we would like to look into these activities in the lenses of security, in the lenses of cost, and in the lenses of new technology. Because these are the three key things, because security comes along with ensuring that the solutions are secure, but also compliance. Compliance is going to be really key, and auditability. So that is one category of enterprise risks that we track. At the same time, cost. As we keep adding these as capabilities, there's a cost aspect we need to worry about, because if you're not maintaining that cost balance, what happens is we could do only a few things with this money we have. So ensuring that the cost is getting the best optimized cost and doing more with less approach. At the same time, as we introduce new technology, we introduce the overhead across our technology stacks, all in terms of putting the technology for readiness and also putting the model in place to make sure that this technology is supported. So these are the three tenets I would call, especially on the security, and we ensure that the data aspect is classified well, and then we use the security control lens, the cost lens, and the new technology lens, where we give enough coaching to the teams to say where they can drive fast, drive with speed, at the same time establish that balance to not worry about the enterprise risk, at the same time also worry about the cost and complexity.
See, the things that you mentioned, which is compliance mandate or security, of course, today business understands the value of not jeopardizing those interests, and that's why they will step up and support you. But then I've yet to see any organization which says, I have an unlimited budget, go do what you want to do. So you got to be able to get creative. When EA pursuing speed, pursuing perfectionism, pursuing tackling the flexibility aspect or offering flexibility to the initiative. You are bound to go through situations where you end up spending more, or you realize that you're going to end up spending more than what you started with, and going back to the business to say, oops, I'm sorry, I need more money because we don't have enough. So you would have had budget challenges and you would have had business case development challenges. It will be a good idea for us to learn, listeners to learn, where are the pitfalls and gotchas if someone goes on this journey, so that they don't have those oops moments.
That's a tricky question, and also it's a time and case, right? It's a case-by-case situation. Most of
What
the
happened
times,
with you? The goal is to see what happened with you. Where did you feel you had to, where you overextended, or you had a challenge, or what you thought is going to happen, it did not happen, and that's where you had to take a step back. It's up to you how much you can reveal as details, but for the intent of the listeners to learn from your journey.
I would be comfortable and confident to say wherever enterprise architecture is engaged upfront and engaged thoroughly into the problem solving, into the opportunity, I have not come across that example that we say, hey, we have gone through a oops moment, that we need more money or we need more unplanned activities, because the whole concept of engaging enterprise architecture in the front would help you to plan better, prepare better, have the alternatives and backup plans, what if scenarios, and then establish a tiered model, which is breaking this big chunk of problem into chunks. And then every 3-month sprints or 2-month sprints will be successful, then you take the next step. So it's not going to be that you go into a project for 6 months to 8 months, and then all of a sudden you realize that, hey, I need more money, or I have done some oops moments. But I have seen situations where there's not been architecture thinking in the front and ability to transform the legacy into a modern architecture, yet not taking the right approach and not considering the alternatives and considering the industry best practices, where we have to pause projects in the middle and then go back to the business and say, hey, we have some lessons learned, it's not going to work, and we have to reconsider where we are, what we are doing in this space. There are situations like that. Point of view here is very clear. Whenever we are taking any problem or any opportunity, first we need to define what is the value driver, what is the business case, and what is the problem we are trying to solve. That becomes the lion's share of the solution itself. The second piece is, what are the alternatives we have, which alternative is best, and how do we chunk it into segments or chunk it into sprints, rather than draw a 18-month or year program or a project. As you do breakpoints, you should be able to know ahead and early with an MVP approach, or maybe with a initial release approach, that how far you're tracking, would you be able to meet your delivery destination and delivery in the right model or not?
Now, all of this that you did would require support from management for sure, but it looks very good in ivory tower or on a drawing board, an architectural blueprint. But on the ground, the people is what matters. Who will make this all work? Starting from you drawing it all the way to seeing it in action. What shifts did you think, or did you have to make, or you had to seek support from your business unit leaders and from your IT group and from the executive management on the people side for this to come to fruition the way it did?
Yes, I think people, we've been talking a lot about structure and the process and methodology, but I think people are the most important in the complete equation here. And when we talk about people, it's not just people alone, but it's the soft skills and the technical skills that they need to acquire. And again, there's no perfect situation where I can say all my team is perfect. There needs to be a continuous education and continuous learning, unlearning, and relearning kind of concept, because some of these behaviors needs to be adaptive. Some of these behaviors need to change, and some of these skills need to be acquired on a continuous basis. It's not that some architects are doing great and they are the star players. They need continuous education as well. That's number one. Number two is the leadership support is very critical. Like when we do this transformation, all my all my leadership, including the chief digital officer, along with the CIOs, along with the CIO business partners, they are part and parcel in this initiative. It's not that the EA mandate is driven by enterprise architecture organization. It is done as part of our Mars digital technologies and as part of Mars mandate that we engage, encourage, and collaborate with enterprise architecture, and we are part of it. I think that's the mindset we need to drive eventually. With that said, it requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of learning. It requires a lot of coaching and facilitation skills from architects to be able to clearly articulate the value drivers and the alternatives, and how do we engage each and every person across the enterprise with empathy.
Now, one question I would have about the management. At what point were they willing to follow the EA group? Because you will have to lead, right? For this to be a EA-centric transformation. What all did you have to do? Because they're people too. While they're management, but they're people too. How did you manage up to make sure they start seeing what you bring and they actually start following you so that EA becomes the digital catalyst and the driver for the whole transformation?
Excellent question. So this is where I think where we can say the rubber meets the road, right? So first of all, we have to earn the trust, as I said, and we have to earn it as a team. And as stressed, I would strongly point out to the collaboration culture. So we are as team, when we represent any direction, any decision, any strategy, we need to ensure all the top-down, bottom-up organizations are coming along with you as one team. That's really critical. The second thing is, as I said, the outward in front, the industry trends, the industry drivers, you need to show that you are relevant, you're connected, and you understand, and you're bringing those outward in front into the enterprise. By provoking, by thinking about out of possibility, by doing some scenario planning and experience map connections, you need to be able to take those trends, whether it's a peer-to-peer industry connections or whether it's partnership, taking a point of view from all your strategic technology partners or working with your integration partners. You need to be able to capture and connect these trends to the moments of your consumers, of your business. Once these moments are connected, then you can drive the moment. And that's where you're setting as a leadership precedence, as a trusted advisor, as a trusted partner for both business and IT to rely on you, because they clearly understand you are the connecting point. Number two, they have the trust in you that you're engaging them and you're making them part of your decision making and making them part and parcel of your success. And lastly, mostly relevant is it's a mutual investment on each other. It's not that somebody is giving you or offering you a table at the chair. You earned it and you are part of this together. And that's the message as a one team that we need to drive.
Now, what you just said definitely would be awesome where you would have built your credibility. But when you get started and you propose this idea, what's the typical uphill battle that is to be expected from the business management? Because you're asking them to change their regular ways of working and thinking.
Yes, I think we need to identify some opportunities. As I indicated, the application complexity and application racialization is an opportunity. Not a lot of people are focusing on, hey, how do we get rid of applications that we are not using? How do we get rationalized technologies which are redundant in the enterprise? And if you, as a architecture team, can look at the state of complexity and execute that in showing continuous results month over month, that will bring your trust. If there is a compliance or a governance issue that's been there for a long time and there is a huge operational risk in terms of either systems not being able to be supported or security risks, and you step in and you carry over and understand how do we resolve those to address those risks. That's second opportunity. And lastly, you identify what are the top priority projects or programs or products, and help those to survive or succeed or turn around. That is the third kind of opportunities. So we need to identify these opportunities. Like any enterprise will have similar challenges to earn that trust first. And it's not that you start something and you fail, and you might fail in your first attempt, but you need to constantly look at these opportunities from industry trends or internal complexity or priorities or these turnaround moments to earn the trust. And once you have the trust and once people understand that you are committed and you are trying to stay relevant, it's in their best interest to partner with you as you move forward. And that's the only secret for this success.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back. And Praveen, when we come back, let's look at the partner ecosystem you will have to work together with. Because while enterprise architecture by design is supposed to look inward, because it is enterprise architecture, but in the digital realm, you're not the only one who is going to touch the customer. So will your other partners, and you have to do it in a cohesive manner and a coordinated manner. That means they also should be stepping up and rethinking their own architecture and their workflows and processes for it to work for all parties involved. But they may have different agenda. They may have different priorities. What did you do in that regard? Because otherwise, you could fix your own fortress, but the other partners may not, and they can become the weakest link, and the customer suffers, and you don't achieve what you set out to do. What happened there? What were your trials and tribulations? What was the learning? And what should people do if they are setting out using EA as a digital catalyst, not only for the internal organization, but also to bring the partners along? Please stay tuned, listeners. We'll be right back.
Today, enterprise technology is both strategic and global. Each week on CTN CIO Talk Network, IT thought leaders from around the world share their experience with listeners as they discuss with Sanjog Aul how they are trimming costs and partnering with business to innovate and help IT become more competitive, better care for customers, and improve the corporate bottom line. If you want to keep up with IT thought leadership, listen to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul at CIOTalkNetwork.com. You are listening to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. So talking about partners, Praveen, they may have different agenda, different budgets, different priorities. And digital, for it to be successful, it requires that partner support, which is outside of your enterprise. So did you get permission, or did you take the opportunity of this transformation internally to also turn around the relationships you had with the other partners so they all came along with you in this journey? And if yes, what was that magic formula you used?
So I think I would classify the partnerships into two. One is the business partnership, and the second one would be the technology partnerships. And even in business partnerships, you can talk about, when you look at an enterprise, it's about connecting several business areas as partners to collaborate and work on a common solution or a common problem, versus connecting the business partners across the ecosystem. Where technology partners, again, you can classify them as your strategic technology vendors that you rely on, and then your integration partners or delivery partners who help you. So in both cases, I think understanding, again, the trends is really key here. Because when we talk with partners who are integrating currently with us with EDI, or some of the partners are ready to consume APIs, it can be one and alone situation. And there is a ramp-up time for all partners to catch up. And we need to be very clear, because there's a cost involved, there's a readiness involved, and there's a process aspect involved in this. So our best approach we have taken would be to look at the industry trends and start offering a common capability that the partners would agree with us in the situation, especially in the business partnership side. Where we talk about technology partners, there's obviously a lot of gaps and roadmap items or backlog items that we can work with the partners to drive innovation, to drive next generation of solutions. And that's very critical to have that partnerships with those technology partners, especially. If you don't have those technology partnerships, we are constrained with what the technology is offered at the table. To conclude this aspect, we are working very closely with our business partners, both internally and also externally. At the same time, working with our technology partners to help us drive this transformation more smoothly and efficiently.
If you were to look at the EA and the way you're trying to move this forward, from the cultural perspective, we spoke about people. But those individual set of people you would work with who are closer to you, or you would influence some of them. But there has to be a fundamental culture which will be conducive for you to carry out this exercise and be successful. Did you have to prime the culture before you did it, or culture became the outcome of this exercise? What happened with it?
This is a unique situation for Mars because one of our 5 guiding principles is mutuality. So we truly live by our guiding principles, and this is one of the best organizations I have seen in Fortune 500 I have worked with that truly believes in these guiding principles following each and every level. So the mutuality brings a win-win situation for our partners in business, for our partners in technology. So as we are jointly investing in new avenues, jointly investing in new ventures and new ecosystems, we are looking at, as I clearly articulated, the value drivers that are more mutual. And having those common goals with mutuality, I think that is one key aspect of bringing this collaborating and successful partnerships.
And so if I were to ask you about your position within the organization, I assume you report to the CIO, do you?
I report to the Chief Digital Officer, who all the CIOs report, global CIOs report under, and I'm one of the peers for the global CIOs, along with several vice presidents for transformation.
Okay. So the reason I asked this question, and thanks for so much for clarifying this, because in many cases, EA actually ends up reporting to the IT organization. And that prevents them from being able to step up, because when you start reporting to business, that means it is a business architecture versus a typical IT-driven enterprise architecture. What should change in the way... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
So the only thing which I wanted to understand is what kind of a reporting structure should it be for enterprise architecture to truly have the wherewithal, the freedom, and what I call as the empowerment for them to drive digital. So you were rightly connected to the Chief Digital Officer, and you had to still work through all of these different counterparts, and IT was more of a peer to you. But in many cases, traditional EA is not there. So you're saying the first step is that they should all pull out of the IT and get into the digital leadership, because in many cases they don't have a Chief Digital Officer. What do you do then?
Great question. I will answer this question in two points. One, the lines between business and IT are blurring, and thanks to digital transformation and digital needs. The reason why I call it is we call ourselves no more IT. We call it ourselves as a digital technology organizations. And the reason why these lines are blurring between business and digital technologies and to start working as one team is this product mindset, or looking at business capabilities and products as a shift in the way of thinking, not in terms of projects and programs anymore, but it's more product mindset with a product lifecycle management and adding features on the product, which can help on a continuous increments and connect this end-to-end approach. So that's a fundamental shift in how enterprises need to think in terms of a product organization, where you have product architects, product owners, and the whole 9 yards of how to create a product, serve a product, continuously improve a product, and manage the life cycle. So that is completely changing business versus IT. It's one product team that's accountable to drive the product. Now the role of EA becomes much more relevant because now you have several product teams, and every product team is focused on their product. And now you need to connect the dots across these products and connect the ecosystem together. So that's why EA needs to be positioned and chartered to support both definition of the strategy along with the execution, because that execution is a critical part. Without execution, your trust and value add and making the realization of a sustained business value is not getting met. So a lot of enterprises who are looking at architecture or enterprise architecture organizations, which is more relevant to address the digital transformation, should be positioned to drive strategy along with execution so they can connect the dots between these product mindset and also ultimately align to the platforms.
On behalf of the show and our listeners, thanks so much, Praveen, for sharing your insights about how IT leaders and business leaders combine hands along with the enterprise architecture group to make sure that it becomes the very catalyst for digital success. Thanks so much again.
Thank you, Sanjog.
And listeners, hope you enjoyed it. I got a bunch of nuggets out of this. Please like us on Facebook, search for CTN, and also be sure to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you again for listening to this segment on CTN. This is Sanjog Aul, your talk show host. Till next week, take care and God bless.